What's going on, gang, and welcome back to another episode of Scared of Normal. I'm Mike Murfitt, and I'm joined by Shawn, and today we're going to be talking about bootstrapping a business. And this is a method of starting a business that we're very fond of. This is how we've started both of our businesses, and yeah, we're really excited to talk about it a lot today. It's something we're pretty passionate about, so.
Yeah, I think, covering the pros, the cons, kind of the stages of bootstrapping, because we didn't even know we were in it. Like these different stages, and looking back now, I'm like, I remember that, and I remember that, and I remember that.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Well, and we talk to a lot of people who want to start a business, and I think the number one thing that we hear from people is that they don't have the means to do it, right? And I think that's like a really hard thing to relay to people, is that we didn't necessarily have the means to do it either. We kind of just like pulled it out of our ass and made it happen realistically. And there's so many massive businesses today that did the same thing, and there's so many different ways to go about starting a business that we're excited to share how we did it and how a lot of other people have done it up into being a great business and like being very profitable. So
totally. You mean do we start the stages, like the beginning stage? I think that's, for me, it's like the founders continue to work that day job while pursuing their dream, because I imagine most people that are in a bootstrap situation, they're doing it because they want to do it.
For sure.
Coffee was that, traction was that for us. Like we both worked those second jobs just to fund this dream. So
totally. Well, yeah, I think starting there is a great point. So when we started Traction, and when a lot of people start bootstrapped businesses, they do have an external income, because they're not approaching an investor or going to the bank to achieve a loan or anything like that. They're kind of just working out of their own pocket. And that's exactly how we started this business. We were working out of our own pocket on our own time, and not really focusing on how we were going to acquire money from a third party. Right?
No. Yeah.
And like that's there's, like I said, there's tons of ways to go about starting a business, but for us, that's something that made the most sense. And we talked about when we were starting this company, do we go get a loan from the bank, or do we try and get some investors, because we're fortunate enough to be around people that believe in us as people and kind of our visions overall. And what we really came back to was wanting to start it on our own and having 100% control over that business. And when you go after, a loan, or you go after an investor, what happens is you're kind of then being driven by that investor to get the money back, or by the bank to get the money back. And there's outside influence on you to how you have to operate your business. And we knew, coming from riding bicycles, that we wanted to be as free as possible. We grew up for basically, since we were young kids, being as free as possible. Nobody told us what to do or how to operate. So starting a business and being told what we needed to do was not something we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think hearing the word no is like hard for both of us.
Yeah.
Like we like to call the shots, and that's like one of the biggest pros of bootstrapping. Like you get to call the shots, and like I think it goes back to us being bikers. You can go hit as big a jump as you want, like take those risks. No one's saying anything. And I don't know, when we were talking about this, it kind of reminded me of team sports, when I was told like, no, you can't do this, that's too hard for you, and
totally.
It like bugged me so much. And then like got into BMX, mountain biking, and I was like, I can do whatever I want. And I think that kind of comes back to this of just like, you get to do that risk assessment, call the shots, and if it works out, great. If not, you get to learn from it and stand back up, get back up, and try it again.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about like bringing on an outside investor or the bank is like, some of the projects, the one that comes to the forefront for me is coffee and donuts. And if you haven't seen coffee and donuts yet, we'll link it in this video or in this, the bio of this podcast. However, it was a project where we decided we wanted to brew coffee and go do donuts in a really fast car, and we were going to make like a coffee around it. And I think if we would have presented that to an investor, they would have probably looked at us and been like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? That's not going to sell coffee.
What are you smoking?
Yeah. And like, what's really crazy about that is like, that was a very well thought out project. We spent a lot of time, a lot of months on that project. But it was still a pretty far-fetched idea to think that there was going to be a return on that investment, and turns out that was our best project we've ever done in terms of money. Like Coffee and Donuts, the coffee itself is our number one selling coffee we've ever put out.
Yep.
So, you know, it's really cool to think about that in terms of nobody was there to tell us yes or no. So like that's one of the pros, but also having an investor could have either made that project more beneficial or they could have shot it down.
Totally.
You know, so like again, there's pros and cons to running a business this direction that we have chose to go.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on from that project was as bootstrapped as it got. You know, like I still can't believe how cheap we got that, and it was trust and kind of return from, you know, helping out other friends. They helped us out. Yep. You know, from where we got the car to
we talk about it a lot too, right? It's like, you know, years upon years of hard work. What made that project come together? Years before, you know, we were putting in the work for that project unknowingly years before we even thought about starting Traction.
Oh, yeah.
And fortunately, we were, you know, had that foresight to kind of lay the ground and build relationships. And that's what made that project, like the culmination of what it was, so excellent. Because like at the end of the day, I think all in for that Coffee and Donuts project, like for producing it and for all the packaging and the materials and everything, like, dude, I can't imagine we spent more than $2,000.
I was about to say $2,000, yeah.
Like, which is pretty bizarre to think about because we had 2 Red cameras there. Probably in total, like those cameras kitted out the way they were probably
$100K.
Yeah, if not more, like mid 100,000 to mid 150-ish probably. And the people operating them were insane. Like we had a $700,000 Ferrari there. Like it's insane that it came together the way that it did. But I think like we've talked about 100 times, it's a culmination of years worth of work. And that's where bootstrapping becomes really fun, is it's not just like you show up one day and you're like, I'm going to do this. It's you've laid the groundwork, you know, whether you think you have or not. Think about how many people you've met over the course of your life and the relationships you've built and how you can activate on those relationships. And how you can continue to grow those current relationships and new relationships. Like that's a huge part of bootstrapping for us. You know, it doesn't have to be that way, but for us, like Traction wouldn't exist in the way it does if we hadn't built those relationships.
Totally.
Know?
And those same relationships are going to be the way that you maybe fund it. You know, obviously you're not taking these loans from investors or whatever, but you know, you have your friends, your family, those people around you that might believe they've seen the dedication you've had in other parts of your life.
Yep.
So they're like, like you have this new idea, like maybe they loan you a little bit of money. Like that is, having those people around you is going to be everything in the beginning.
Totally.
So.
And I think for me, like bootstrapping, one of the coolest pieces of it, and I say this to everybody all the time when I talk about bootstrapping, is that you get to work on every piece of the business. So when you begin to hire, you know exactly what is needed for specific roles, right? So like for me, like when we started Traction, I had no idea what design was. Like or I shouldn't say it that way. I knew what design was, but I didn't know how to execute on that. And now like I'm pretty deep into that design world and video editing and all that stuff. So I'm fortunate because then when we start to hire for that, we know what the expectation is. You know, we've both worked for people, we've all probably worked for people where they have an unrealistic expectation of a task, and that's because they've never actually worked in that realm. You know, like a project manager generally doesn't have any idea of like how an engineer is building a rocket ship.
Yeah.
They couldn't build a rocket ship themselves, and like that starts, you know, prolonging projects and creates red tape, and like there's all this kind of issues that comes along with that. However, when you bootstrap, like you are working on every piece of the business. And one thing we've started working on is like really starting to figure out like what each role is going to require as we grow, right? And so when we start hiring for those roles, we know like what Shawn or I have personally put in to each of those roles and what we're going to be expectant of an employee down the road. So that's like a pretty cool piece of bootstrapping, you know? It's like nobody's like taking advantage of you and you're not taking advantage of anybody. Like that's a very equitable way to start a business, in my opinion.
100%. And going kind of add to that, it's like we are wearing a lot of hats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like from shipping to roasting to the design, just everything, taxes, this, that, and like kind of forces bootstrap business owners to like create a model that works. Because if it doesn't, you're going to know right away, because most failed businesses struggle with a poor business model.
100%.
And you're forced to develop something that produces immediate cash flow because you don't have anything in the bank. So it's like you got to get that cash flow, reinvest it into your business, and just like really figure out what works.
Totally. Well, and I think we've talked about it, I believe, on like the beginning or the story of Traction, how we started. You know, we started by buying a roaster, which was like $18,000. And then the remainder of cash that we had left over was $8,500. And I remember, you know, it was our first partner and Shawn and I. And I remember like telling them both, like telling you and him both, like, dude, this is not a lot of money. Be very careful. And then like before we all knew it, like I looked in the bank account and there was $300 left. And we were all just like, holy shit. You know, like $8,500 went really quick because like we had to buy raw coffee and we had to pay rent and we had to buy bags to ship the coffee and boxes to ship the coffee. And like money goes really quickly if you don't have your finger on the pulse of it, you know. And like when you're starting a business and you're looking at like a lump sum of money like that, like obviously $8,500 is not a lot of money. It feels like a lot of money when you're starting a business and you don't really have like perspective on what it's going to take to run the day-to-day stuff, you know. And like if you're not careful, you run out of money really quick. And that's the beauty again of bootstrapping. That's a pro and a con in most cases, is like if you can be very aware of every dollar that goes in and out, and you can ask Shawn all day long, like any dollar that is spent, I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know, it could be a 99-cent charge on the card in the bank and like what is this? You know, because like, you know, you hear the jokes of like, you know, CEOs counting toilet paper. It's like there's a reason for that, and every dollar you spend really does count. And if it's not going to a place of saying like, hey, we need to make this business profitable, you're going to sink the ship fairly quickly.
Yep. You
know, and when you're dealing with your own money, it becomes a lot more, you know, scary. And yeah, I don't know. Like that's a pretty crazy thing. You know, I see businesses quite often where they're spending money very frivolously, and those businesses usually don't last a long amount of time when they're a startup unless they continue to raise money, because they don't have their finger on the pulse of what's being spent if they just have this massive, you know, lump sum of cash.
Yep. And I think that's like, you know, that inventory, you know, before we knew it, we didn't even order that much and we're out of cash.
Yep.
So I think what has been really cool from the beginning, we were ordering too many labels, too many of this, too many of that, and like kind of wasting money. And it's been really cool to see us like kind of really refine that. Like it really requires a fast turnaround of inventory to like run on that type of money. Yep. And I feel like we're
just create those projections, right? And like learn from previous, you know, purchases or whatever it may be. And that's the hard thing also when you're starting Bootstrapped, is like we didn't really have a perspective of how much coffee we were going to sell, how many labels we needed. So we were just kind of running willy-nilly. And I think that kind of brings up a good point of like, talk to people who are in the same industry around you, because there are people that are willing to step out and help you.
Yep.
You know, because, you know, as secretive as some businesses or some industries can be, there's a lot of people who started in the same exact spot that you're starting in, or going to be, you know, entering into. And people can see that, and they can really see that you care, and they're going to help you out. And that's like a really cool thing. Like fortunately for us, like, you know, I had spent a few years in coffee underneath somebody who was very all about bootstrapped and like making sure you're watching the bottom line. So like we came in with that little bit of knowledge of like, hey, we really have to watch like, you know, our cost of goods versus what we're bringing in, and back and forth on that. And like, but if you don't have that foresight, what you end up doing is spending more money than you're bringing in. And next thing you know, you're sitting there in the red without money, and you're like, all right, what's next? I just put everything I had into this. I don't know what to do.
100%.
And that's not a fun spot to be in. So.
No, not at all. And it's interesting to see the way that bootstrapping kind of shaped us. You know, in the beginning, it's like, all right, we're not starting a cafe. As much as we want that, like, you know, collaborative space where we can bring all the homies in, like we had to start in a barn with an e-commerce business. Yep. And like looking back now, I love it. Yeah. But at the time, it was like, fuck, like, all right, like this is what we have to do, and just focus on profits, get that, you know, up, and just push out. Yep. Act like we're, you know, way more badass than we are in the beginning. You know, it's like we put on this kind of facade in the beginning. Hey, we're not in a barn. We're like,
well, we knew, like, you know, and that's like another beautiful thing about bootstrapping is like, if you know what your vision is, you can really portray that regardless of what your facility looks like
Exactly.
or whatever it is, you know, like we were able to say like, this is who we want to look like.
Yep.
This is who we are. We just don't have the means to like portray that yet. So we were doing everything we could, from buying black cloth to hang on the walls because we couldn't afford paint.
When we were taking photos and videos.
Like it's pretty crazy to think about like how we were able to achieve this look and feel online, you know, and like you said, we built our business backwards of most coffee models. Most people who roast coffee start as a cafe and then work into e-commerce, whereas we started with e-commerce. And like it's really crazy to talk to other roasters in the area or around the country where like we'll talk about like how much volume we're doing on e-commerce, and people's like eyes like go super wide and they just like can't believe it. But it's like we were kind of just forced into that hallway. And that was the lowest barrier to entry. You know, we really thought about it. We really spent a lot of time when we were first talking about starting Traction. We really talked about like starting a cafe. You know, we were looking for a retail space to have a cafe and a roastery. And we really started whittling it down because of that bootstrapping model. It's like, cool, what are our costs going to be? And how do we back in the capital that we have into those numbers, and what is actually feasible for us to execute with the money that we have and not die within a month?
100%.
You know, because like it's really like right now, like thinking about if like $8,500, like we're spending $8,500 easy a month, more than, you know, and it's like, it's pretty bizarre to think about that. Like, whereas when we started, like that was it, you know, like that was going to be the end of our business.
100%.
So yeah, it's just really good to like, when you are starting, like really look around and figure out what your costs are going to be. You know, what software do you need? What hardware do you need? You know, what's your rent going to be? Like that was something we didn't really have perspective on, you know, like how much was a space going to cost? And we were fortunate enough, again, going back to the relationship thing, that we were able to like post on Facebook and be like, hey, we're looking for a space. And we had a close friend of ours reach out and offer his up, and it, you know, it serendipitously worked out. But, you know, when you're bootstrapping, it makes you really focus on the very granular details, the smallest of the small. And when you're doing that, that creates a foundation. I always say it, you know, we're trying to build a foundation where we can build a 200-story building on it. We're not trying to build a foundation where we get to 5 stories and we have to scrap the building and go back to the foundation, because we were very short-sighted with it. And I think that's a big, like, we're very fortunate to be bootstrapped because we've been able to look at business that way.
100%.
You know, we're looking at the smallest details possible. And like, it also creates a lot of like integrity in the business. You know, we get to interact with everybody directly, and like, you know, it means a lot more to us when somebody orders coffee, because like we started this with our own money and we know what it takes to like order a bag of coffee. You know, we're not out of touch with $1.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, you know, we get to go into every wholesale account. We're touching it. We're getting direct feedback from them. And I think that's what's so cool with bootstrapping. It makes you develop these like well-rounded skills, from, you know, doing the design to the roasting to just every little piece of it. And I think it really refines who you are. And I think it's one of the biggest keys to success with bootstrapping, is that it forces you to know everything about the business, inside and out.
Yeah, and if you don't, it's going to become very apparent very quickly, right?
There's no gray areas. Like, you know, in and out what's going on. Well, and like you're saying with hiring, like, you know exactly what the terms are, and be like, hey, if you work your ass off, like, get out of here at noon. You know, like, I know how long that takes, and you killed it.
And I think there's also a lot of value in it too. It's like a very humbling experience as well, because like you're not just focusing on one type of task. Like, you know, I'll go from like setting up collaborations and designing really cool artwork, the stuff that I'm extremely passionate about, to like scrubbing the floors. You know, and like that's a humbling experience, because you're reminded that like, if the floors aren't clean, when those people come in to talk about collaborations, it's not going to happen, because they're going to be like, damn, these motherfuckers are dirty.
Totally.
You know, like it's kind of funny to really like reel it back and be like humbled by that stuff. And when you do have like a big cash injection and you can hire somebody to scrub those floors, you're losing a little bit of like that humbleness. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that we get to live in every aspect of the business right now. Like we get to scrub the toilets, and we get to, you know, sweep the floors, and then we also get to go out and hang out with customers, and like we get to have the high level discussions of like how we're going to make this business operate and like make money.
Totally.
You know, and like when you do have, from the jump, a bunch of employees underneath you, you kind of lose a little bit of that beauty. And again, I think unless you're very wise and you've started multiple businesses, it creates or you're not able to create a foundation for that 100-story building to stand
100%.
on as adequately.
So we've been talking about how sick it is and how much we learned. Let's flip the coin.
Totally.
What are the cons? I mean, in my mind at the beginning, it's risky.
Yeah.
We're both, come from pretty modest means. So like if we lost all that money, that's a pretty big deal. It's not the end of the world, but it would have been a big hit. So it is risky.
100%.
Number one.
Yeah, it's not all beautiful.
Yeah.
And like I think, you and I are both very fortunate because we come from a world of, taking risk. Like we've made these relationships that I've, referenced in this conversation because we have taken risk, since we were very young. So when it came to bootstrapping, it was kind of a no-brainer for us. But for somebody who is coming into bootstrapping and like they're pretty scared of risk, like just be aware that it's going to be stressful at times, and it's not always going to be like this straightforward, like, oh, I'm learning every piece of the business. Some days you're going to be like, I can't tell you how many times we've sat there and been like, fuck, dude, how are we going to pay for this? Or like, when we first moved into this building, like utilities got dropped in our lap super randomly that weren't agreed upon. And like, that was one of those things where it was like, holy shit, that's a $1,500 charge. And like, we don't really have that kind of money.
And it's hard, especially if you have, family that threw money in it. And it's a good thing if you are scared, you are, nervous about making rent, because it means you fucking care.
Totally.
Like, it's if you're coming in and be like, whatever, like it'll work out. Like it's not for you.
Totally.
So like that feeling of being, not helpless, but just butterflies in your stomach of not knowing what's going to happen. It's going to make you work harder. It's going to make you hustle, and it's what you need. So
when I think, taking that perspective of being like, knowing that this is a risky way to enter business, and then turning that into a motivation of saying like, cool, I know I have all these expenses. I only have this much money in the bank.
Yep.
How can I sell X amount of product to cover that so I can go on to the next month and continue to operate business as usual?
And that could be almost a con, is like a bootstrap business requires significantly more organization, right? Like
100%.
There's no one telling you what you need to sell, this, that, because you got to sweep the floors. You got to, make sure everything's boxed, ready to go. And then you're going to be like, all right, profits were this. I need to go, increase sales by 10%.
That's the beauty of like having an investor, right?
Yeah.
It's like generally, if somebody's investing in your business, they have some business experience, so they can help you organize.
Oh yeah.
And they can help you figure out those things that are very difficult, like turning a profit, or like, hey, what are your margins? Like those are the really tough thing. And like, talk about risk. Like, again, like we're very fortunate, again, going back to like the backgrounds, right? Like coming into this business, like I was just like, all right, here's our margins. We can't drop below this. And like, we're very aggressive about that from the beginning. And like, I think, if you're not looking at like what your industry's margins are on average, that's like, but if you don't know that's a question to ask, like, how do you know?
Totally.
And like, thankfully, like from my previous life, like I had that beat into my head. Like, what's the margin? What's the margin? Okay. Well, if it's not this, then like you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to get it there. 'Cause
100%.
like,
especially going into grocery, right? Like some of those big ones for us.
You have to have that stuff really airtight because for us, like we are e-commerce focused and we can take a retail margin. But the second we go into a grocery store, it's going to be, a wholesale or distribution margin, which is going to cut down our profit significantly. And if we don't have that stuff airtight, and like what's happened over the last year and a half where our cost of goods goes up, you're going to be, in a boat filling up with water really quick, and you're not going to be able to get it out fast enough.
Yep.
So it's good to have like the perspectives on that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I think like although there is a lot of risk involved, I think it, like I've said, it's very beautiful the way it shapes your business into something that it's a very malleable thing, and you can
totally.
I've talked to you guys about this a bunch, but like a small business and a bootstrapped business in particular, you have to think about it like a speedboat. You can turn that thing so fast and you can whip it around and you can adjust course for whatever's coming your way. Whereas when you have that bank or that investor over your head, or, you are a big business with a lot of employees. Like you're driving a freight ship.
Fucking
And
Titanic.
you're turning very slowly because you have so many moving pieces. And like, that's been something for us, like as risky as some of the moves we've made have been, those have been our saving grace in a lot of situations because we were able to like assess, and we're kind of doing this every day. Like, okay, what is, this coffee bringing in profit wise? Cool. How can we, bring in more or less or whatever? How can we sell this coffee? Who's looking at this coffee? Like we can really be on top of that stuff because we're aware of it,
100%.
We're touching it and like it is affecting us at the end of the day. And we've talked about it numerous times, but like when it comes to like paying yourself, that's another risky part of bootstrapping, right? Like we both would have loved from day one to start collecting a paycheck, but we had to remind ourselves from the jump, like the second we start taking a paycheck until this thing is turning a solid profit that's predictable, we're literally just like paying ourselves out of our own pockets. And that felt kind of foolish.
Oh yeah. And then we've said it 100 times, if this business fails, it's on us. Like we have such a platform now. It's like, if we don't, navigate wisely, like why should we even open another business? Like, and it's just like that cutthroat mentality that I think we both have. And there's one other con before we move on is something I've had in my head. If we did take on, an investment, just the networking possibilities that person might have had. Totally. They could have, had top level help, who knows what grocery they could have got, like, nationally on Whole Foods level. And I think that's something to consider.
Or just expertise that they can bring to the table, right?
Financing, methods. There is so much that those people can bring. And I think if you find the right person, it's something to consider. So there is pros and cons. It's not like bootstrapping is the perfect thing. I think it is the way to success. But I think, you could leapfrog a lot of businesses with the right investor, but there's a lot of cons to that as well. So just balancing it.
Yeah.
So
it's a difficult balance, and there's, we've had opportunity to take on investment and like we've talked about it seriously and like we still haven't come to a point where we're just feeling comfortable with that, and not to say that we ever won't, but I don't think at this point in time it's something we want to do, even though we are aware of that kind of stuff, right? Like we know that if we took on X amount of money, we could probably grow exponentially faster. But, we're talking about like building that foundation, and what we're wanting to do is make sure that foundation is as stable as possible so that in the event that we do take on investment, we can like really pour gas on the fire and move quickly and like make sure we're spending that money adequately. Because for me, I've been in this world now for almost 8 years. You've been playing in it for 4. It's like if somebody walked up and gave us $500,000 right now, we'll just use that number for a round number. I don't know how we would spend that adequately without being like, damn, is that actually like benefiting the business? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know how we would. And it's like, I don't know if that's a shortcoming or not, or if that's just us being aware that we're not there yet, and that's a funky place to be in. But I think that bootstrapping mentality has also given us that perspective of like, well, we've done everything in-house ourselves up until this point. Why not keep going that way?
100%. And obviously there's stuff you can get, right? Like we can get a bigger roaster, this or that. And but yeah, you got to be careful. I think you can go down that road of spending money real quick if you have it, So I think that's what's so great about being bootstrapped. Like you said, it's like you stop and think about every dollar spent, like every penny. You're like, all right, is this actually helping? Is this driving sales? Is this needed at the end of the day?
It's actually funny, like talking about taking on money like that. I was listening, I think I was on Instagram or something, and there was a reel that popped up with Mark Cuban from Shark Tank. And somebody was asking him, like, has he ever like lost his ass on a Shark Tank investment? And he's like, oh yeah, the one that comes to my mind immediately was this $1 million investment for like a breathalyzer that like hooked to your phone or something like that. I can't remember directly. But he was saying like they invested $1 million into this and it was a great idea. And he started following the guy that, the founder of this company on Instagram. And all of a sudden after this investment hits, he starts seeing him in Bora Bora and he starts seeing him in Fiji, and he's out hanging out with all these like big time CEOs. And Mark Cuban like messages him and he's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm networking. Well, soon enough, guess what? The guy's calling Mark Cuban asking for more money. Well, he wasn't investing that money into the business. He was investing that money into networking, which was basically just hanging out with his homies or trying to like make high level friends. And, you know, that's like a really tough thing is like once that money gets dropped in your pocket, it's very easy to go out and be like, cool, now I'm a high level CEO. I can go do all these fun things or whatever it may be, right? Like, and that's where I always come back to this bootstrapping mentality of like, cool, let's just like continue to pour the profits that we're making back into the business. And for our sake, like we've very seldomly paid ourselves. We've paid ourselves one time in the course of 3.5 years. That's freaking insane. You know, when I really think about that and like, but at the same time, it's not hurtful to us because we know like that we're pouring back into something that we genuinely care about. And it makes me happy to know that like we can continue to show up, you know, and it's not about the money right now.
100%. Yeah. If you can show up that long, it means you care.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, going from that beginning stage of just like working, you know, dual jobs, whatever it is, to this like customer funded stage where, you know, the customers are keeping the operating costs going, you know, the fund's growth. Once operating expenses are met, you can really start pouring that gas on the fire. And that's kind of where I see us. It's like, all right, like everything's kind of paid for. We're able to, you know, be kind of mobile. It's like we want to do the snap chill. We have the funds to do it. We want to do this. We want to do that trip. And like, it's all steering for sales. Like sales fix everything. And it's cool that we're both, you know, hyper vigilant about it. And I think it's the next little bit for us. It's going to be really exciting, you know, and it's, I don't know, what's been the biggest thing for you, I think, bootstrap wise, that's helped us just.
I mean, it comes back to just like learning those like skills.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what bootstrapping is like most exciting about to me. It's like the skills that it's taught us. You know, we've talked about it in like the Espresso Forge podcast, like the troubleshooting and like all these little things, like it all comes along with the bootstrapping. Like when you have the money, it's easy to go out and pay somebody for a design. Is that design going to be directly reflectant of what your vision is and your business? Probably not.
And are they fully, you know, giving their heart out?
Yeah. Is that person as in love with your business as you are? Or when it comes to something being broken in your facility, if you're not out there troubleshooting it, is the technician that you hired to come in to do it ripping you off? You know, it's those little things. And it's like, it's those skills that come with the bootstrapping piece of it. And it's, you know, sweeping the floor. It's like, you know, the old saying, it's like, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And that's what we talk about too in this room quite a bit when we're not doing the podcast. It's like, how can we set an expectation for ourselves so that when we do have employees coming in here, they're trying to, you know, mirror that. They see what the expectation is without us having to line it out on paper. They see us out there sweeping the floor and not missing a spot, so they're going to go out there and do the same because they feel obligated to. You know, they see the passion that we have, and, you know, that shit is contagious. So when you're like showing up in that way because you give a shit, like you're going to attract people who also give a shit. So that's like, for me, like that's why bootstrapping is the best way to start a business, I think.
Yeah. And it's not something you're taught. I think in school, you know, everything's force fed to you. The homework, this, that, same thing with jobs. It's mostly just kind of force fed, and it's a different mindset. No one's, you know, waking you up to be like, hey, you need to go find 3 accounts.
Totally.
You need to go do X. And I think that's why we relate just the mountain biking thing or racing. Both of us race. Like no one got you out to do intervals. Like you did it because you cared about it. Mm-hmm. And I think once you get that in your head of like, hey, there's no one here to hold your hand. And if you want to do it, it needs to come from like a deep down place in your heart that like you could see yourself doing it for the next 10 years.
Totally.
Obviously, maybe not getting paid for that long, but like you can show up every day with a smile on your face for the most part and want to do it and beat yourself yesterday. It's like, all right, if I got, you know, 3 accounts last month, I want to get 4 this month. And just like, it's almost a game for me in my head. It's like, I want to just beat myself.
I like that you say the 10-year thing, because I've told you recently, I'm like, dude, it's crazy for me to rationalize that I've literally almost been doing this same exact thing for 8 years.
Yeah.
When I really think about it, it doesn't feel like that. It's almost a decade.
Yeah.
But I've been doing the same thing every single day, and like, it's starting to work. And that's really freaking cool. That's an incredible feeling. You know, and it's cool that we were able to like jumpstart the business with that credential of the 4 years in the past. And like, you know, it's so many people like I talk to people and they have a great idea. And I always hear that, if only I had the money. And again, I just go back to the thing. It's like, just start somewhere.
Yep.
Start with the easiest entry level piece that you can find. For us, it was, we weren't able to buy a pallet of coffee. We weren't, we were able to buy like a bag of coffee from somebody who was nice enough to sell us a bag of coffee.
Totally.
And like, we started so freaking small. And like, obviously that's grown into us being able to buy multiple pallets at a time if we need to. That's freaking rad. But like, we didn't start there. You don't have to start, like, if your idea is grand, that's awesome. But dial it back if you don't have the funds, start somewhere small. You want to start a t-shirt company? Cool. Start with one t-shirt, print 10.
Totally.
You can find places that will do it. You want to start, I don't know, like whatever it is, a hat company. There's places that'll print one hat for $15. Sell that for $30. You just made $15. This is a pretty freaking good deal.
Yep. And I think we all get stuck thinking about it for way too long. And the thing that's always in my head is 10 minutes of actions, better than 10 hours of planning for the most part.
Totally.
Obviously, you got some stuff that you need to get in line. And I think that customer, funded stage, the beginning stage, is all this internship talking about like it's finally working. Like how long, would you say your internship was? I mean, 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙬𝙬, like how much were you learning? It's like free college almost, you know? Like,
I always say that like, my almost 4 years at 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙬𝙬 and being inside of that Oscar Blues world, like I always say I got like a free master's degree out of that experience, right? Because I went in there not knowing, my ass from a hole in the ground. Like I didn't know much of anything about business. And I came out of there like being able to make some pretty intricate spreadsheets and like being able to like talk to retailers at a high level and just like being able to communicate and like also just like knowing how a business operates.
Totally.
Like, and I feel very fortunate for that because, we hit the ground running with like, cool, here's our margins for coffee. Here's some retailers we can go talk to. We had like that infrastructure built and like, we were fortunate to have that. And if you don't have that, it's like, so much of that information for myself was learned. Like, obviously I was kind of in the mix, but I was also like being a sponge. So like, if you're going to work at a day job, like and you need to learn about finance stuff, like go make friends with somebody in the finance department.
Go make them a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Figure out what you need to learn. And like, dude, the internet is like endlessly bountiful with information. Like you can find literally anything you need on there. Like literally like pretty much everything I do on a daily basis at this point is like something I've learned on either YouTube or just Googling, and it's like, it's very easy to say like, oh, I can't do that but like we live in an age where you can literally Google anything. Reddit is a great place to learn stuff. Like look at how much you've learned about the stock market on Reddit. Like there's so much information out there. So like when it comes to starting a business as lean as possible, like the options are out there. And so if it's something that you want to pursue, like don't let it take a back seat because you don't feel like you have the money to do it. You do, I promise. Don't eat out for a couple days a week and eat ramen and rice and beans. Like that's something that happens over here more than I'd like to admit, but that's what has helped propel this thing forward, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what this podcast is all about. Scared of Normal. It's like making those sacrifices to achieve something that you dream about.
Yep. And that going back to the internship, like you show up for 3 years for your internship. At the end of that 3 years, people are like, dude, they're not messing around.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, making hats, roasting coffee, if you can get through that and you use that time to be a sponge, to learn, like you're going to have every tool you need to succeed.
Yep.
You just have to show up for 3 years.
Well, we talk about it a lot. Like, we were always told it's like 3 years, 3 years, 3 years.
Yep.
If your business can make it past 3 years, you're going to like your chances of surviving are a lot higher. And like with that kind of stuff, I'm always just like, fuck you. Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I can like literally say when we hit that 3 year mark, like within that same period of time, like things really started clicking. And like people who had never ordered coffee from us before that were closer than most people who ordered coffee, that like friends and family, they started ordering coffee. And I think it was just that moment of like realization for a lot of people that they've seen it for so long.
Yeah.
And like more recently, I've started kind of relating it to like friends of mine that have kids. You know, like think about how long your friend has a kid for before you're like, oh shit, yeah, you have a kid. How old is your kid? Holy shit, they're 3 years old.
Yeah.
I feel like you just had your kid yesterday. It's the same thing as business, you know? It's like, think about like how distracted you are in life all the time, right?
Yeah.
So like that stuff flies over people's head a lot of times, and like until they've seen it enough freaking times, then they're like, oh shit. Yeah, that guy, I know somebody who has a coffee company.
Yeah.
I know somebody who has a t-shirt company.
I mean, how many times have we both been asked like, oh, you guys, do you work at Traction?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, even people that are like on Instagram and like on my bio, it's like, you know, co-founder of Traction.
Yeah.
And then they Instagram me like, hey, do you work?
Do you own Traction? You're
not
an owner?
even. Be like, do you ride for them? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So it's funny though, like we're so close to it that, you know, people don't understand. So like showing up day after day, kind of telling your story. And that's what's so beautiful about Instagram, or like just social media, is like you can get in front of a lot of people in a bootstrap way. It's how we built, you know, our business was kind of Instagram.
Well, it's how we've built our personal brands as well. And like, it's crazy now, like we've both been utilizing those personal brands significantly more over the last few months, and like seeing how that aids in growing the business has been phenomenal as well. Like, you know, I look at the amount of website visitors and all that stuff almost every day, and seeing like in the last month and a half, you and I both have been posting on Instagram significantly more, and seeing how much those page visits have exploded is like pretty bizarre. And it's, you know, it's really cool. It's just that showing up, and like, you know, the bootstrapping idea also like makes you be a little more creative in terms of how you're approaching solving the problem. You know, when you have a lot of money, it's like, cool, let's throw money at ads. Like we've spent money on ads, but not as much as we probably should have, because we haven't had it. And now that we do, it's like, well, shit, man, like I've become really accustomed to this like guerrilla style of marketing. And like a big part of our business is also turned into collaborations. And that's really grown our footprint, because we're working with like-minded businesses that their customers aren't the same as our customers, and vice versa. So we can like grow their footprint, and we can grow our footprint and do it together. You know, it's building community through collaboration. And like, I don't think we would have necessarily had that mindset if we had a bunch of money to just throw at ads.
100%.
You know?
And I don't know, I think one of the biggest things for us obviously was that collaboration. And it's cool to see each group that we work with, like what each side learns from. Because I feel like each collaboration we become better and dial it in. And like, I don't know, it's like, doesn't matter if they're in the same industry, like pick people's brains. Like the best advice I've ever gotten are from these random people I would have never thought, just writing it left hand, start chatting about something, and it turns into business, this, that. And I'm just like, that's the best thing I've heard in a long time. And it just, you know, it's crazy who you can run into, and they don't need to be in the same, you know, they don't need to be a coffee roaster to help me, right? So,
well, and I think it's almost better that way, right? Like we always talk about like, you know, businesses that are like, I'm going to beat Amazon. It's like, dude, the second you're looking at a competitor in your industry is the second that you've already failed, because you're trying to be just like them.
You can't out Amazon,
No,
right? You got to find your own corner.
And it doesn't matter what size business you are. If you're looking at a business down the street from you that does $100,000 a year in business, like that's not much, but you're not going to beat them because you're trying to be them. And they've already got it figured out. They've already got that business. So like figure out who you are and why you are, you know, and like, again, I think that's a big part of that bootstrapping mentality. It's like, you can have all these core values and all these things written down, but unless you're like living by them and living within like that culture and like actually being that, like none of that like speaks through. And like, that's where like starting the way of bootstrapping is very beneficial, because you're like forced to live the culture.
Totally.
You can't talk about being a hardworking like outdoors person, blah blah blah, and then just like go sit in your nice air conditioned house and like answer a couple of emails every day. Like, you have to be about that life. You can't just talk about it. And that's where I think, you know, this model really is effective. It forces you to be in it. You know?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like that brand image, that culture piece is number one, and then the product's got to back it up. You can have the best coffee in the world, the best product, but it's like if you're not having that brand that people want to identify with and be a part of, it's going to be hard to get that thing off the ground, because people want to spend their money in good places. So if they think you're a shit company, even though your product's good, you're not going anywhere.
100%. So, well, and it's like, I've said this for, you know, probably 5 years now, but like the second you start talking about creating culture, you've already lost. Because you can't create culture. you just are culture. You perpetuate culture.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't sit down and be like, cool, how are we going to make this environment very culturally rich? It's like if you're having that conversation, like you've already lost that battle, because like you can't, like I've seen it happen in businesses that used to be very like edgy and cool and core, and like, you know, they've grown and they've had to go away from that and they kind of want to go back to it. And it's like, well, your CEO isn't that.
Yeah.
It's a top-down equation. If your CEO isn't that, but he's talking about being cool, edgy, and core, but he's driving off in his fucking $200,000 Audi,
Yeah.
well, that's not cool, edgy, and core. Like, he's not showing up in that way. So why should everybody else? Why are you going to attract cool, edgy, and core?
For sure.
It's just, it doesn't make sense. So like you have to live it, and like that's harder said than done.
Especially as the companies grow, you get board members. Like, it's a sticky situation.
It really is.
They might have the spreadsheets, the P&L, all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm very thankful of what we have and where it's came, and kind of excited to see where it goes. You know,
Same.
like if we do take investment, that kind of makes me sick to my stomach talking about it right now. But yeah, it's college, man. It's fucking college. I can't believe how much we've learned in 4 years.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
Bizarre. And it's also nuts to think that like come October, which is what, 3 months from now?
Yeah.
Is it 3 months? Yeah, it is 3 months. Wow. Actually, today's July 20th. So almost 3 months to the day, Traction will be 4. So
no, we actually need to do something. I feel like last year we were like too busy.
We dropped the ball last year. So maybe it's time for Coffee and Donuts Part 2. I don't know what it's going to be, but
big group ride.
Yeah, something fun. But yeah, it's really hard to like wrap my head around the fact that it's almost been 4 years. And like, but when I really step back and see like how we've gone from shipping, 10 orders a week to like 20 orders a day, like, or whatever it is, it's pretty crazy, like to see it all coming together. And like, we just did an event this last weekend with 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙬𝘿, which is one of your sponsors. And like the amount of people who are so excited about seeing Traction there, really like, it hit me deep, because 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍𝑒𝑖𝑐𝑙𝑠 is such a culture, and like going to that event like made me appreciate that brand even more, because like one of the owners is standing there hanging out with everybody like in the mix, and like that's so cool. Like that is culture, and like to be able to be represented next to a brand like that was so freaking cool. And like that to me is enough validation to be like, cool, if I don't get paid for another 5 years, like
totally,
at least we built something to know that we can stand next to a brand like that. Like they are the premier cycle company right now. Like they have the fastest racer in the world, like, and we get to stand there next to them,
and just the trust, totally,
and be trusted,
trusted, because it's like their biggest year event. So once a year they put on what they call the gathering. They, make custom sticker packs for everyone. They, cater the food. They have these group rides that go out. It is an amazing event. Like little bikes. We're sprinting on little bikes, made a slalom course.
Yeah.
People are crashing. It's just like the CEOs out there announcing, and it's just a feel-good thing, and it's that culture piece. And what's so cool is it's 400 people, and we have to have coffee ready in an hour span. 400. Think about 400 people walking up to a coffee shop, and it's you and I. And it's like, all right, how do we do this? So we get an extra brewer. We're, go to the coffee shop down the street and ask them for extra Cambros. We already had some.
And I'm just going to say right now, shout out to Dale for that extra brewer, and shout out to January Coffee for those extra Cambros, because
no way
we would have been in a mess. Like over the course of 3 days, we served nearly 100 gallons of coffee and probably 250 plus shots of espresso.
It was insane. Up at 3:45 every morning to have the brewer warm by 4:15, and just brewing till 6:30 when people showed up.
It was rough. I'm not gonna lie, like on the last night we were there, like it was just like a full-on party.
Yeah.
And Shawn was smart and went to bed early, but I decided to indulge a little bit, and I was out till like 1:30 in the morning, and I was just like, the next morning I was hurt. But it's that culture piece again, right? Where it's like, cool, we're gonna wake up and we're gonna get this done because we committed to being here, and like
100%.
Like, and it also comes back to like, if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough. And we've made it through, and we made that day almost 40 gallons of coffee, and participated, and it was super fun. And then we hopped in or loaded up the truck and drove back home.
And it was going back to that trust piece. Like 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝑍𝑒 was like, hey, bring more coffee than you think. Like we'll pay for it. Like we cannot mess this up. And like the more they were like kind of concerned, the more I got concerned. You
Yeah.
know, like I knew the numbers were right. I knew we were gonna have enough coffee. And then to where we asked for help, you know, 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙬 came and helped us, and
Yeah.
like couldn't have done it without her.
Dude.
Big shout out to her.
Yeah, she saved the day for sure. And well, and like, you know, we're setting up. What day did it start? Thursday, or we got there Thursday night, and it started on Friday.
Yep.
And we're setting up like our little booth, and I'm just like looking at Shawn, and I'm just like, I don't know, dude. Like,
400 people.
this
Yeah.
is about to be like, I'm seeing all the cars rolling in, and then like the bulk of the people started showing up on Friday, so like more people are rolling in, and I'm just like, dude, this is about to be insane. And like it was, but like we made it work because like again, we know what we're capable of, and we know what we're capable of through the way we've started this company and over the years what we've delivered on. And you know, the second that like that first day rolled around, that fear went away, and like we're having so much fun just like serving cups of coffee and talking shit with people. And like I wish I could do that every single day.
100%.
You know, as much work as that is, and like whatever, like I wish I could do that every single day, because that's what this is all about, is hanging out with cool people and working with cool people. And like that's the beauty of starting a business. And I've probably said this a million times. You probably hear, everybody's probably tired of hearing it, but like starting your own business is the equivalent of starting your own utopia. We get to live in our dream world every single day because of this, and we're fortunate for that. So,
but if anyone, you know, has any ideas, please reach out. If you ever want to come talk business, talk about a startup, come drink beers. If you're around, like, we love it. We live on this stuff.
Totally.
So,
well, and we don't, you know, clearly you're listening to this and you might know more about business than we do. We're not going to ever claim to be
100%.
the smartest business people on earth, but you know, this is what we've learned over the last few years, and like this is what we're passionate about. And like we said, there's plenty of ways to approach starting a business, but this is the way we've done it. And we come from very modest and humble backgrounds financially, so like this is what made the most sense for us. And you know, if it's something you're interested in, don't let money be the hurdle that, you know, stops you from pursuing starting something cool that you care about, because there's going to be so many other hurdles that are so much bigger than money. You know what I mean? Like money is very small once you get going. So you can do it, make those dreams happen. And like Shawn said, if you ever have any questions, like we're open book here. Like we'll answer any questions you have. And if we don't have the answer to the question, we know quite a bit of people that might have the answer to the question you're looking for. Or, you know, we might point you in the direction of a book or a YouTube video or a TED Talk that we've listened to personally. We're always here to help any way we can. So,
and I think most of the best decisions we always made was always coming back to a gut feeling. And you're the only person that knows. You know, like when I wanted to drop out of college to go race bikes, like it was this gut feeling. When I knew that, you know, a stepping stone away from racing was something I started wanting, it was this gut feeling, because I never had that for so many years in racing. It was just like racing. And like I asked people, and they had advice, but it wasn't like this perfect advice I was looking for. And like I think it all is inside you. You just gotta like follow the feeling. Totally. And that's the only thing I tell people. And like, hey, should I move?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's only you know,
and
dude.
it's like, as cheesy as it is, like it's the thing I say all the time. It's like, follow your heart.
Yeah.
You know, follow your fucking heart, dude. Because like if you feel that deep inside of you, like you just got to do it, because you're gonna get to a certain point where you have other obligations or responsibilities, and you can't follow your heart. You know, even if you do have those other obligations or responsibilities, like you got to make yourself happy. You got to make sure you're checking those boxes, because when it comes to that point in your life where you're reflecting on what you've done, you're going to be really bummed when you look back and think like, man, if I would have done that, or what would it have been? So just like roll the dice, gamble a little bit. Like the worst thing that's going to happen in most cases is it's going to be money. And the beautiful thing about money is you can pretty much make money doing anything these days. And
100%.
you know, you can go pour coffee at Starbucks and make like $20 an hour. Like that's enough to like get by and eat for a couple weeks while you're reassessing and figuring things out if you really need to do it. So where there's a will, there's a way. So
thanks for listening.
And thank you for being part of the Traction family. Like
100%.
I probably say that every episode too, but seriously, man, like
I want to write that on every note,
dude.
I'm just like, thank you guys.
You probably didn't see the video, but like when we were in Steamboat Thursday night, remember? So we were in Steamboat for this Yeti event, and we got to the event, set up, and realized that we had forgotten milk. And so where we were was about an hour from Steamboat. So I was like, fuck, man. So I jumped in the truck, ran back to Steamboat, and I had like an hour and a half worth of work to do as well. So I like posted a video on Instagram on the Traction account, like working from the McDonald's parking lot. Just kind of showing like, dude, that's funny. This is like truly what it is. Like half the time when I am on the road, I'm sitting in a McDonald's parking lot stealing their Wi-Fi.
You just want
like,
a soft serve cone.
Dude, that would have been a good idea, actually. I should have done that.
Yeah.
A nice and sweet Coca-Cola. But, that's what it's about. And like, if it weren't for people being part of the Traction family, like none of those fun moments would exist, And like in the moment, sometimes that shit really sucks. But like, when I really reflect on it, and like I posted that video just being like, dude, I'm sitting in a McDonald's parking lot, like uploading these coffees and making sure a podcast gets posted because like, the Traction family's counting on that shit, man. Oh, yeah. And like, it's cool to like have that level of accountability and like also people excited about that stuff. It's cool to be able to share these things and like these words and like, we might not know what we're talking about at the highest level, but like, this is what we feel and like, this is what we do know from where we stand. So
100%. And the reason we hop on is like everyone that gets on and be like, hey, these podcasts are ripping, like I listen to them on my rides, my long runs, or at work, and like that's what gets us into this hot little podcast room.
Yeah.
And makes us kind of lay it all out there and be a little vulnerable with everything. And just thank you to everyone listening and everyone that reaches out. Like it means exponentially more than because it's when we first hopped on, it was vulnerable and kind of weird to talk about our stories,
Totally.
From being kids to now. Like,
well, it's fun to feel it like starting to flow a little bit more smoothly back and forth and like really see what this, again, we knew what the vision of this was, but we're really starting to see it come together. And like, the feedback from all of you has been incredible. Everybody in the Traction family and like you guys sharing it with your friends who aren't even aware of Traction yet. Like, it's so cool to see like how quickly this project is going. And like, I just got to put the little shameless plug in here since we are talking about it. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe because it really, really helps us make this project, continue on. Leave a comment. And if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple or Amazon, leave a review, leave a 5-star. Let us know what you think about it because it really does help, show other people what this podcast is all about if you're enjoying it. So that helps us immensely. And, just sharing it with your friends that does more than you can even imagine. So,
and we geek out on all the metrics, the comments. You have no idea. We both are meticulous about being on there every day. And just thank you guys and thanks for listening and keep being scared of normal.
Oh yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.